Hi, thank you so much for joining us. We have a great show for you today. We're going to be talking to Nikki Kofkin about real estate. She's a real estate agent in the greater Chicago area and is quite knowledgeable about the entire process of buying, renting, selling, and trends in the industry, and even answers some of the burning questions we have received that we know you want to get some answers to. Full disclosure, she helped my wife and I find the place that we currently call home, but we couldn't really be happier, so that worked out for us. But without further ado, my name is Jaron, along with my wife Sammy, and this is Adulting 101. We hope you enjoy.
Yeah, so hi Nikki.
Hello.
I'm so excited to be able to talk to you today.
Me too.
About real estate and, especially buying your first property and home. I know we're sitting actually at a property that you helped us get. So I'm really excited to be able to share some tips with folks. It can be daunting to start the process. So I just kind of want to start out with having you explain how you even became a realtor in the first place.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I actually went to school for journalism, completely unrelated to real estate. But I decided, after going to college that I did not want to do anything related to news or journalism. And I actually, when I was in school, I found this website called Bigger Pockets that kind of lit a fire under me. I just became totally obsessed with it. They have podcasts, they have books, but for me, the thing that really I just couldn't stop learning was from forums. They have just kind of online resources where people can post questions and their experiences.
Like
yeah, it's basically Reddit for real estate, and it's not anonymous. And I would just open tab after tab after tab and just have all these pages open of things that I wanted to learn. And I would sit at home and I would just read them and learn, and I loved it. And that was really, really influential for me. I'd always had an interest in real estate. Even in high school, I remember browsing Zillow and, loved looking at homes as we drove through our neighborhoods growing up. And yeah, so it was something I did have a passion for. I've always been pretty entrepreneurial, liked starting my own businesses. So after I graduated, I spent a little time, 6 months, just kind of doing some small jobs, and then decided to get my license. I talked to some family friends who were also in the business, who were really great at encouraging me. Also had great support from friends and family, which was really helpful. So yeah, here I am, about 6 years later.
And so thankful that you're here. So, having just come out of the pandemic, I mean, every single industry was impacted.
Yeah.
And we're still in the pandemic,
Right.
just maybe the lower end of it.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about what it was like for you as a realtor during this time?
Absolutely. At first, when things started happening in March of 2020, I really thought that I would have no work that year. I thought I was going to be pretty much jobless. And I was kind of ready for that reality. And the first 2 weeks of the gravity of the situation was kind of like that. People really didn't know what was going on. And I really had nothing to do for a couple of weeks, maybe even a month. It was really slow. But after that, there was such a shift of people at home from their jobs with really so much extra free time and nothing to do, coupled with interest rates being lower than they ever had been.
And those stimmy checks.
And those checks. People had extra money. They weren't spending money going out. They weren't traveling. So everybody had extra money in their pockets from not doing their normal activities, and then the government checks. So, people, all of a sudden, there was so many people looking for new homes, and people wanted more space, or they wanted to move to the suburbs to get out of the city since they couldn't really do anything in the city anymore. So there were multitudes of reasons for people wanting to move, whether out of the city or into a bigger spot in the city, or for whatever the reason may be, I actually had the most busy year of my life in 2020 and 2021, work-wise. Yeah, it was pretty unbelievable. I'm very thankful that I was that lucky, and I think a lot of agents had the same experience of just like, it was crazy. It was very, very busy. It was very competitive. But yeah, I'm very grateful. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah.
And I know later on we'll talk more about what the market looks like today. I did want to ask you a little bit more in terms of, like, with real estate, there are so many options that people have when they're figuring out who they want to work with as an agent.
Absolutely.
So I have had some questions from friends who are trying to figure out the process, and, you know, is it a faux pas to work with multiple realtors as you're trying to figure out the right fit?
You know, it's interesting. I think when it comes to real estate in general, it's something that we're not taught in school. Like, we don't really know. Even me, when I was learning all of this, like, we don't know what we're doing, you know, like it's a huge learning curve for everybody. And it's very normal for people to have that question and to wonder, like, is it okay to work with multiple agents? It's a conversation that I have with every client that I work with, whether renting, buying, selling. And it's definitely on the agent to have that conversation with their clients. But I think it's also on the client to be open and communicating with the agent too. It's a two-way street, and communication in any relationship, whether it's friends, you know, your spouse, and in a real estate transaction, I think communication is always important. So, yeah, I always have that conversation, and I let my clients know that actually it's really best to only work with one agent at a time. Unless you explicitly have that conversation with your agent that you'll be working with multiple agents, and they say that they're okay with that. However, in my business personally, that's not something that I do. I work with my clients exclusively, and that's because I put a lot of time and effort and energy into, you know, working as hard as I possibly can to make sure that I'm finding the best house and property or rental or whatever it is that I possibly can for my client in their situation. And if they were to be working with other agents at the same time, unknown to me, because we would be having that conversation, then, and they found something else and I didn't know about it and they were working with someone else, then, you know, it is a waste of my time and energy because I have done all this work for them. And to my point, I don't get paid when you're working with a buyer or someone who's renting a property. I don't get paid until they actually find that property. For instance, like if you're buying a property, I don't get paid till the closing table. And it's a weird thing to talk about. Like, I always have this conversation about commission with clients because, you know, it's good to be upfront about it. I'm not trying to sell you the first place that you buy. Like, I want to make sure that you're finding the perfect place for you. Like, I'm not motivated by getting that commission check as soon as possible. But that being said, like, that is how it works. So, you know, if we are looking at properties and I'm spending all this time helping you, and then in the end I don't get paid, like, at the end of the day, it is my job. So,
so just communicating
exactly
is important.
Exactly.
And, so everyone kind of knows what to expect.
Exactly. Yeah. It's kind of that was kind of the long way to go about that, but exactly.
Yeah. And so as people are trying to figure out the best person to work with, what are some of the things that they should be looking for in a realtor?
For sure. I think, you know, some things that are important, one would be, do you feel comfortable with this person? Like, you're going to be spending months talking to them, communicating with them. Is it somebody that you feel comfortable expressing your needs and your wants and how you're feeling? Because it's, you know, definitely a very feelings heavy transaction. There's a lot of emotions that come with it. So is it someone that you feel comfortable talking to about everything that's going on? Is it somebody that you can trust, that you know that they're going to have your best interest in mind, that is going to work really hard for you and make sure that you know, they're representing your best interest? And is it somebody that I would say is doing this full time? Because you want somebody who's really in the business and is experiencing things every day and getting new knowledge. And, you know, there's always something new that happens in this job. Like 6 years in, there's always something new. And I've really learned all that through experience. So the more experience I've gotten, the more I'm able to help my clients. So yeah, I would say those are a few big ones.
Okay.
And communication, I'd say.
Yes.
We've already talked about that, but yeah, I'd say someone that you can communicate with openly and is quick to communicate with you too.
Right.
You can get a hold of them.
Yeah. So with those 6 years of experience that you have under your belt, you've helped so many people find a new home for themselves. Does any particular client stand out as a success story that you want to share?
Yeah, sure. I think at least most recently, the one that comes to mind is a client that I've worked with a couple times now, and I helped them sell the home that they bought with me a few years ago and then buy their next home.
Oh, wow.
And it was an extremely competitive market for us. When we listed their home, we listed it privately, and we did a weekend of showings, and within that weekend we got an offer that they were extremely happy with. So we never even went on the public market, which was great for them because they're a family with a lot going on. So it was really exactly what we could have hoped for. We got exactly what they were looking for in their offer, and it was a really smooth transaction. On the buy side, it was really, really difficult. We spent a couple of months looking for a place, outbid multiple times, and finally there was a property that I'd had my eye on that was also private. It wasn't on the public market yet, and I told them, I'm waiting for this one, you guys. Like, I'm waiting for it to be available for showings. I have a really good feeling about it. We went and we saw it, and they loved it, and we made an offer. And I believe it was a multiple offer situation, and we won that multiple offer situation. And yeah, they are in their new home. And the one thing that really sticks out to me too about that is I remember from our first conversation about, they were getting ready to move, and they said they really wanted to find a new neighborhood and community where they really felt involved in the community. They wanted more neighbors that they knew, people that their kids could play with. They just wanted more of a community feel. They liked where they were now. They loved their house, but it was a little less involved in their neighborhood. And now they told me this neighborhood could not be like more perfect. Like kids coming up, knocking on the door to play in the streets, and they have
for trick or treating.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just like a complete 180. That really sticks out to me. That like they both the couple really wanted a neighborhood feel, and they got that. So I'm really happy about that.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
so let's get into it. Let's talk more about in terms of how do you know when it's a good time for you to rent versus buy?
Yeah, for sure. So when it comes to renting, I think if you're thinking about if it's a good time or not to buy, if it's a place that you think you're not going to be in for more than 2 years, if you think it's going to be less than 2 years, probably a good idea to consider renting, because you want to own this place for enough time that the home appreciates and you've gained equity in it, so that when you sell and you pay that commission, because you don't pay a commission, you don't pay your agent until you go to sell that property. So you want to own it long enough that when you do pay that commission, it's going to, the appreciation will make up for that commission. So you do want to own it long enough. And also that when you make those monthly payments, that you're gaining equity every month too. So the longer you own it, the more equity you're gaining in that property. So if it's less than 2 years, you probably are not going to have enough equity in that home that it's actually going to make it worth it when you go to sell the property. So also I'd think if you're moving to a new place that's unfamiliar, and you don't have a lot of time to make a decision, then it's probably best to rent, even if for the short term, just to kind of learn the area, learn the neighborhoods, figure out what you want, what you need, instead of making a rush decision that you don't have all the information.
Right, and then you're tied down.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and then you want to sell within a year or two, and then, again, you might be losing money. It's possible that you don't. Like, I'm not saying, like, you can't buy, live there for a year or two and make money. Definitely happens. But in general, that would be my recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So let's assume then that someone wants to buy. What are some of the common misconceptions that come up with clients that you work with?
Yeah. I think one of them is that people think it's a lot harder than it is. It's actually not too difficult, especially when you have someone who kind of guides you through the process. It's definitely more attainable than a lot of people think it is. I think that's like the number one misconception. And there is a lot that goes on in that, process of the contract period, but I am here to help any agent's there to help make that a little less stressful and more manageable. But I'd say that's my number one misconception.
Yeah, and I know that when we've talked in the past too, there was, even I had the misconception that you needed to put 20% down.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. I think you're right. I think that's another big misconception, is that you need a lot of money. I have had a client actually get a check for like $1,000 at closing because of, the things that as agents, we know how we can kind of work with you and your budget and, the loan options that are out there with working with the lenders that we have. And we know how to kind of make things work for the situation that every person's in. So it's actually a lot more attainable for everybody than they think it is. And if it's not, then we'll let you know, like, you know what, maybe it's best to wait a little bit and, maybe save up a little bit. Yeah, exactly. But if it's within reason and within, if it's attainable, then, which it is for a lot of people, then, yeah. Oh, and one more thing I wanted to add to your point about not knowing that you could put less than 20% down. There are a lot of programs where you can put as little as 3.5% down. So you really don't need this massive down payment. So if somebody is considering buying a home, but they're not sure if they can afford it, or they're questioning whether or not it's the right decision, I definitely encourage people to reach out to a realtor, a lender, anyone with a background in real estate or finance. If you have a financial advisor, reach out and just see if it's something that's worth considering.
So going back a little bit to what we were discussing earlier with the pandemic, and you saw all that growth during that time. So what's the state of the market right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely different than it was in 2020 and 2021, but that's not necessarily a terrible thing. I mean, in 2020 and 2021, we had like exponential growth like we've never seen. So right now it is slower, but relatively speaking, it's more normalized. It's definitely, it is slower, maybe a little slower than normal, but it's not anything that we should be like absolutely terrified of. But yeah, I mean, it's when you're coming off of these highs of 2020 and 2021, it definitely is quite the contrast. But yeah, I mean, every market has its cycles, especially in Chicago. Spring and summer is definitely a lot busier. Fall and winter are a lot slower. So it's expected that it would be a little bit slower right now. But surprisingly, actually, inventory is still a little bit tight in Chicago. It's a little low. Home sale prices are up. So, it does seem like the market is still doing pretty well here. Yeah. And in different pockets and different neighborhoods, things are going to look a little bit different. But overall, I mean, we're still okay.
Okay. And, I think that there's also this concern about a possible recession coming up.
Right.
So if that were to happen, what would that really mean for either property owners or people who are looking to buy? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, recessions, it's not something that we can predict. Nobody has the glass ball to tell you if or when that's actually going to happen. It's definitely possible. And, just like in the stock markets, if there is a recession, it's generally the knowledge is, or the recommendation is, don't sell your stocks when the markets crash, you know, hold on to those and maybe buy some more, because at the end of the day, the stocks come back up. And it's the same with houses. You know, in every recession besides 2008, housing prices have recovered and gone up after a recession. It takes a couple years, but if there is a recession, it's just knowing that the property prices should rebound, and they should come back stronger. And it's impossible to time. You just really never know when that's going to happen. So if I'm looking to buy, or if someone's looking to buy, if you're on the sideline for years potentially waiting for a recession when you could have invested your money and start gaining equity ahead of time. So it's hard to say. I mean, I think it's better to kind of get the ball rolling than waiting on the sidelines for that perfect time to buy, because it's really hard to predict.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, if there is someone out there that's thinking, okay, I do want to buy, but when do I really know that it's the right time for me? Yeah.
You know, I think every person's situation is different, and a lot of times my clients, I work with a lot of first-time buyers, so a lot of my buyers are coming to me with a lease end date. So I'll talk to them about, you know, their lease expiration, and generally we start looking about 4 to 5 months before their lease expires, which gives us plenty of time to find a new home. So yeah, I mean, I guess it really depends upon a person's situation. If they have a home to sell and a home to buy, you know, there's more intricacies there too. So it really depends on each person's situation, and it's something that you really need to talk about with your realtor to discuss and figure out the perfect timing and situation. And when it comes to Chicago, you know, like I said, spring and summer is definitely busier, more competition, prices are a little bit higher. You're more likely to get into multiple offer situations. And then fall and winter, it is generally a little bit slower. So you're probably facing less competition and maybe less multiple offer situations. But at the end of the day, if it's not going to be convenient for you to buy in fall or winter, I don't think you're going to be in a bad place to buy in spring or summer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as people are thinking about places to buy in Chicago, since we're having this conversation here, are there any hot spots that people should be looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll say again, don't have the crystal ball. I don't know what neighborhoods are going to be the next hot neighborhoods in 5 to 10 years, but you know, DePaul actually has a group that comes out with some really good numbers and studies, so we can put a link to that. And that mixed with my own personal experience, some of my favorite neighborhoods that I've seen have a lot of appreciation over the past few years. Logan Square, Wicker Park, Bucktown, Humboldt Park, Avondale, Rogers Park, Edgewater. I would say those are some of the neighborhoods that I think are really great to look into. You know, you've got your tried and true Lincoln Park, Gold Coast. Those neighborhoods are very well established, and because they are established, they're good at riding out those ups and downs. And they're very popular. You know, people when they know Chicago, if they're not from here, they've generally heard of Lincoln Park. You know, that's one of the more well-known neighborhoods. So definitely an established neighborhood there. But some of the more appreciated neighborhoods that I mentioned, I would say those are some great ones to consider. And there's tons of great other neighborhoods you just have to do some research and yeah.
Well, I was really banking on that crystal ball, Nikki. So
next time.
We'll put a pin on that. But you know, speaking of what those factors that people should consider when they're looking at neighborhoods, what are some of the things that you would recommend? Yeah, absolutely.
In doing the research, I would say that access to public transportation is a big one, especially in Chicago. Or the highway, even being able to get to a highway for work. Even with people working more from home, I think it's still an amenity that people like to have to visit friends or to visit other neighborhoods. It's still really sought after amenity. And then just having community amenities like coffee shops, restaurants, bars. So having kind of things that people have access to within their neighborhood, community spaces even for families, schools, parks, for their dogs, you know, green space. So I'd say those are all definitely important things that people look for. Yeah.
Great. So as we're wrapping up here, can you provide us with an overview of what the home buying process looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, let's say someone reaches out to me, then I will have a conversation with them, similar to a lot of what we've talked about today. I want to get their needs and wants and explain the home buying process to them. A lot of people who reach out to me are first-time home buyers or selling their first home after we've purchased it together. And, just remind them of how everything works. I'm going to be guiding them through the whole process and making sure that I can take as much stress off the process as possible and, really taking care of everything. It's full service, So, I will set up a search, when we're looking to buy a property of properties that they might be interested in. And then, we would go look at those properties, do private showings, or, the client can go look at open houses as well. And let's say that person finds a property that they are so in love with. They tell me, we really love this, we want to make this our next home. Then, I would work with them to write an offer on that property, which looks different for every home. So I would give them my advice and opinions on what I think we should do. And then we negotiate with the other side. And again, that looks different depending upon the situation. And let's say we finally come to an agreement, the seller accepts their offer. Then once both the seller and the buyer have signed that agreement, that's when it's officially under contract. And from the time that you sign a contract to the time that you actually own the property, it's usually 30 to 60 days at most. And then the most happens between the first 1 to 2 weeks of actually going under contract. So, we're getting an inspection done. You're working with the lender on all of your loan documents. I recommend an attorney, and all these people I have to recommend to my clients too, and as any agent normally does. So, you'd have an attorney reviewing all the contracts. These are legal documents. And I'm there every step of the way with my clients to kind of make sure that they're not confused about anything, that they can ask me any questions, and, just making sure that they're on top of all the deadlines and know what's going on. But yeah, once we've finished all that, they get to walk through their property one last time right before closing, usually the night before. Then they go to the closing and they sign a bunch of documents, they get their keys, and they're a homeowner. Yeah.
Great. Well, we hope that is for a lot. We hope that for a lot of our viewers today, that they will be able to go through this process successfully.
I hope so too.
And if someone is ready and they are looking for a realtor to work with, do you have any resources where they can find someone, or if they want to work with you, where could they look for resources or contact you?
Absolutely. Personally, you can text, call, email me, send me a DM on Instagram. Pretty open. I can put all my information at the bottom. But I would say if you have a friend who's worked with an agent, that's how I get a lot of my referrals, is through people who've worked with me before. So if not me, which I'm totally fine with, feel free to reach out to a friend maybe that who has worked with an agent before. See how they liked their experience. If they liked working with that agent, then check them out online, see how their reviews are. I think it's a great way to find your next agent. Other than that, there's reviews of most agents on Google, Zillow, the company that they work for, and you can read testimonials. My testimonials are all over Zillow and Google. So, most agents have an online presence. But again, I think a great way is to just talk to people that and get a reference.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great talking to you.
Thanks. That's unmatched. It's oh crap, why do I keep messing this question up? This is a scary question.
You're good.
Okay, I'm ready. And Avondale and we're gonna have guy was like, what is that neighborhood next to Wicker Park?
Wait, just
Brief overview of what the home buying process looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So, dang it. I'm sorry, my brain died.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to take 5?
Yeah.
I know it's at the end.
Okay.
But you can still take 5.
Just like
And
a
you'll turn
minute,
it
maybe
off?
like 1 minute.
Okay.
Yeah. And, once they find a property that they like, that's when, I'm gonna restart this. I forgot a big piece of this.
Okay.
Okay.
So we go again. So we're wrapping up here.
It's shutting down.
No.
We gotta do this in one take.
You guys are golden.
Okay.
All right. As we're wrapping up here, can
I'm
you?
not done laughing.
Okay. Nikki. I feel like this will go in the bloopers at the end.
You can't look at me like that. Okay.
Okay.
Whew.
All right. So as we're wrapping up here, can you please provide a brief overview of what the home buying process looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, oh my God, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.